Have you ever heard something moving in your house when absolutely nothing should be moving at all? A soft creak in the corner of a dark room, a slow, steady rhythm, almost like breathing. Now imagine waking up at 3 in the morning, your bedroom cold enough to fog the glass, and seeing a wooden rocking chair, an old, harmless piece of furniture, slamming itself back and forth so violently the floor begins to crack beneath it. And the worst part? Every time you turn on the lights, it stops, completely still, as if it had never moved at all. Tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of a chair that didn't just move, it hunted. Welcome back. If you're new here, you've chosen a good night to join us, because the haunting you're about to hear is one of the most disturbing I've ever come across. This isn't about a doll or a mirror or some creaking attic. This is about a simple rocking chair that turned one woman's life into a nightmare she couldn't escape. Tonight, you'll discover how she found the chair, what it did when the lights were out, the dark history behind it, and the final encounter that still keeps her awake. So settle in, dim the lights, and listen closely. The story begins with a woman named Lydia Harper, a quiet, soft-spoken school librarian who had just inherited her grandfather's old countryside home. It was the kind of house that looked charming in daylight, but changed its face entirely once the sun went down. Creaking floors, drafty windows, shadows that never seemed to sit still. And in the living room sat the only object her grandfather insisted remain untouched, an antique oak rocking chair, carved by hand, polished smooth by decades of use, the kind of chair you'd picture an elderly man dozing off in while reading the newspaper. Lydia didn't think much of it, but her neighbors did. Whenever she mentioned it, their expressions tightened. One neighbor finally told her, "Your grandfather, he didn't sit in that chair. He talked to it." That should have been her first warning, but the real trouble came that very night. Around 1 in the morning, Lydia heard a soft creaking from the living room. She assumed it was the house settling. Every old house makes noise after all. But as she listened, she realized it wasn't random. It was steady, rhythmic. She went downstairs, and there it was, the rocking chair, moving gently, just slightly, as if someone had just stood up from it. She walked over and placed her hand on the armrest. It was warm. The next night was worse. At 2:47 a.m., Lydia woke to the sound of wood slamming against wood, hard, repeated, violent. She stepped into the hallway, and the noise grew louder. Bang, bang, bang. She rounded the corner, and her breath froze. The rocking chair wasn't rocking. It was thrashing, whipping itself forward and backwards so viciously that its legs lifted off the ground. The floorboards beneath it splintered with every slam. She turned on the lights, and the chair stopped instantly, dead still, like a child freezing after being caught misbehaving. But the floor told the truth. Deep grooves cut into the wood, as if the chair had been dragged or pushed by something strong. The next morning, Lydia tried to rationalize. Old houses shift, maybe the floor was uneven, maybe she was dreaming, but she knew she wasn't dreaming. Desperate for answers, she spent the day searching through her grandfather's belongings. That's when she found the journal, a small leather-bound book with shaky handwriting on every page. One line was repeated over and over: "The chair is not mine. I only keep it sitting." Another page read, "It rocks when it's restless." And then the line that made her stomach turn cold: "Never sit in it. Never watch it for too long. And God help you if it ever stops on its own." Tucked inside the back cover was an old photograph. Her grandfather stood beside the rocking chair, looking pale and terrified, and behind him, reflected in the window, was a woman, gaunt, colorless, her hands resting on the back of the chair. The problem was, there was no one else in the house when the picture was taken. That night, Lydia locked her bedroom door. It didn't help. At 3:12 a.m., she heard her doorknob rattle, soft at first, then violently. And then came the sound she feared most, the scrape of wood sliding across the floor. The chair. It was outside her bedroom. She held her breath as footsteps, soft but deliberate, crept closer. Then silence. When she finally dared to open the door just a crack, she saw it, the rocking chair, perfectly centered in the hallway, facing her door. Not angled, not drifting, deliberate, watching. The air around it shimmered with cold, and in the faint darkness, she could see deep impressions sunk into the cushion, as if something invisible was sitting in it. The chair rocked once, slowly, purposefully. Lydia ran. She grabbed her keys and slept in her car until morning. That was the night she decided to destroy it. At sunrise, she dragged the chair into the yard. It felt heavier than it should have been, like someone was gripping it behind, pulling back. She grabbed an axe from the shed and swung. The first strike hit wood. The second hit something soft. A sound echoed from deep inside the chair. Not a crack, but a cry. High-pitched, furious, inhuman. The chair jolted upright with impossible force, knocking her to the ground. It rocked violently in the yard, faster and faster, even though there was no wind and nothing touching it. And then it slowed, stopped, and tipped forward as if someone had just stood up from it. In the grass beneath the chair were footprints, small, deep, leading back toward the house. Lydia stared in horror as a figure appeared in the doorway, a silhouette shaped like her grandfather, except it wasn't him. It moved wrong, stood wrong, tilted its head too far to the side. It raised a hand, beckoning. Lydia didn't wait. She jumped in her car, sped down the driveway, and never returned. To this day, the house sits empty, but those who live nearby say that sometimes, late at night, if you walk past the old property, you can hear it creak, creak, the sound of a rocking chair moving on its own. And sometimes it's not coming from inside the house. It's coming from the porch, right behind you. So what do you think? Was the chair haunted? Was it tied to the woman in the photo? Or did something far older simply need a place to sit? Tonight's story reminds us that even the most ordinary objects can hold the darkest secrets. A chair, a shadow, a sound in the dead of night. And if you ever hear furniture moving on its own, don't look. You might not like who's doing the rocking. If you want more stories that keep you awake long after the lights are out, make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more nightmares. And if you're brave enough, watch the next story. Just don't watch it alone.